Hello, everyone, and welcome to How I Built This Resilience edition from NPR. This is where we talk about how businesses are building resilience during this challenging time. Happy Casual Friday to everybody. I hope you're excited for the weekend. I really need it. I'm excited. In the window next to me are Luke Holden and Ben Conniff, the co-founders of Lukes Lobster. Lukes Lobster is a restaurant that offers traceable, sustainable seafood in 10 states, also in Japan and Taiwan. And they also supply some of the country's highest rated seafood restaurants. Now, these guys were first on the show back in September of last year. We did a live show in Boston. It was so much fun. And wow, how things have changed since then. Luke and Ben, welcome.
Thanks so much for having us on, Guy. We appreciate it.
Before we begin and dive into it, I just wanted to thank and acknowledge support for this series from 3M. 3M is using science and innovation to help the world respond to COVID-19. 3M is on track to produce 2 billion respirators globally by the end of 2020. In addition, 3M has also maximized production of other solutions, including biopharma filtration, hand sanitizers, and disinfectants. You can learn more at 3m.com/COVID. So thanks again to 3M. And also, for those of you watching on Twitter or Facebook or YouTube or LinkedIn, please submit your questions to us. For Luke and Ben, we love those having your questions. So first of all, guys, I haven't seen you since September. It's good to see you. At a certain point, I saw a photo of you, Luke, with a mustache. So it must have been a really intense year for you. How are you guys doing?
We're doing all right. The mustache came about right when COVID started, and as soon as we felt a little bit of relief, I let the mustache go. It was something my wife was very appreciative of.
And you guys are in Maine right now, right? At your office, your headquarters.
We are, yes. We're in Portland, right near where we buy the lobster from fishermen, and where our restaurant is here in Portland.
And tell me, how are you guys managing? I mean, clearly you're together, so you're part of probably a bubble. Like, I'm assuming, you're working together and seeing each other on a day-to-day basis and going into the office.
Even more so, in many ways, guys, kind of felt like we brought it right back to 2009 when we started this business.
Huh.
It's been hip to hip, and a lot of the great leaders on this team.
It was going to happen in Boston, the North American Seafood Expo. This is a huge expo, from what I understand, a huge opportunity for you. And then I guess at the beginning of March, a lot of the Chinese exhibitors start pulling out. So you must have already gotten wind that something was going on. I mean, were you already starting to think about the possibility of what we're seeing today already that early, or were you just kind of thinking, well, let's wait and see?
We were fortunate and unfortunate to start to have rumblings of this and reality of this through our partners in Japan and a prospective partner that we were talking to in Shanghai. It was pretty wild how those conversations tracked exactly how this played out in the US. But we sort of, we in the country really had that mentality that this wasn't going to happen to us.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's what we all kind of thought at that point. So when it became clear in March that the pandemic was really going to create some severe economic disruptions, you guys had to take some severe actions, right? I mean, you had to shut down your processing plant. You had to let go about 300 employees. Walk us through what you did, and presumably this was to save the business, to keep it going. So walk us through the process of what you did as you realized this was going to be really severe.
It was absolutely horrible. It was really March 7th, that week, that this kind of slammed home for us. And we really, I think we were good to act quickly, but this business I mean, not just because my namesake is in it and my family is part of it, but there is no blend. There is no difference or delineation between my personal and business life. So when you're faced with ultimately making that critical decisions to like save a business, it affects your family and friends in major ways. And that week was, there's nothing like that I've ever experienced, calling up some of your friends and family members and furlough, terminating, reducing salary. We got super small that week. We got aligned around some strategic initiatives pretty quickly. And like some of those kind of give you a feel, because safety and people was always our number one priority. And for us, like moving all hourlies to unemployment and doing it quickly was intentional. We knew that there was going to be backlogs in the unemployment offices, and we knew that they'd have financial solvency getting the unemployment with the additional 600 from Fed. So something like that was intentional, to act quickly there for their benefit. We also made sure that we had personal conversations with every single one of those teammates. There was no text, there was no email, there was no like untethered connection. We made sure that they understood the why behind all of these decisions and the intention behind it. And that continued. We made sure that we kept tabs and open dialogue with all of those teammates, so that we ended up shutting everything down besides one shack. And now we've got the seafood company back up and going. We've got 12 shacks up and going. And there's no way we would have been able to do that unless we had that mentality of people first and make sure that we had those open communications to bring people back when the time was right.
We've got Luke, Holden, and Ben Conniff, the co-founders of Lukes Lobster. If you've ever seen one or had one of their lobster rolls, you know they're pretty amazing. If you're watching on Facebook or Twitter or YouTube or LinkedIn, and you've got questions for these guys, please submit them, and we will try to get to as many as we can. What did you say to an employee that you had to furlough? I mean, what was the conversation like? I mean, how did you explain that?
It was tough. But transparency is one of our core brand values, and we were not going to separate ourselves from any of our core brand values during this crisis. So we were honest with them. I mean, we were in a tough spot. We're a very seasonal business to begin with. Like, we make most of our hay Memorial Day to Labor Day, and this couldn't have happened at a worse time for a business like us, because we're kind of at the end of our rope to begin with. We're just at the end of our reserve and just about to start rebuilding reserves. So when this comes and sales go from 100 down to 20% or eventually nothing, like there was nothing in the kitty to help get us on the other side of this. So we were honest about that. And we were able to have good, frank, honest conversations with our teammates, because we certainly, we made sure we over communicated in every kind of step of this. We made sure, whether we were right or wrong, they understood what was in our heads and how we were making decisions. And I think as a result, we've always had very, very good relationships and trust with our teammates. So they understood that we really didn't have any other option.
And I'll also say, like, the thing that everyone on this team understands is that we're here for a larger community than even just the Lukes Lobster team. You know, we're here for a seafood industry. We're here for fishermen and truckers and people in the production facility. And ultimately, if we're not there to buy the seafood as we've promised come May, June, July, then the entire machine fails. And you fail that many more people. So every teammate at Lukes understands that they're part of that broader family, and that for them, you know, to go on unemployment to stay safe then actually was creating the opportunity come summer for us to continue buying and continue that ecosystem working.
Yeah. So tell me how it's working, man. Because I know back in May you you've got a lobster processing plant in Maine. That's where all of the lobster that's sold at your restaurants and that you sell to other restaurants, it goes through there. It's not operating at full capacity. You've got, I think, about roughly 30 restaurants in the country, and about 12 that are now open. So I'm assuming that you're not able to buy the quantities of lobster that you had expected or hoped to buy in, starting in May. Is that right?
It's right. For us, we've had to completely pivot. So in the U.S., about 70% of the seafood is consumed within restaurants. 70% of the seafood. And so when you completely take that out of the supply chain, you're left with a complete imbalance. And we knew that heading into this. So for us, that seafood company has had to completely re-engineer itself. We've had to pivot from selling to other restaurants and food service and casinos and cruise lines and build that grocery branded business that we had. We had to get from big unbranded commodity packs and start producing grocery branded freezer and refresh container type packages. So like that was a huge pivot for us.
And basically, you because obviously you can't sell to cruise lines, and casinos probably aren't buying a whole lot, and as you say, restaurants are not buying a whole lot. You kind of had to sort of shift your focus to like what, frozen lobster and lobster meat that you sell at grocery stores that's available for consumers to just purchase.
In a nutshell, like we don't have the option. Fishermen go out and fish. We don't want to be the people that say, hey, that's enough product. We want these guys to be able to go out and compete and earn a living. So we've had to figure out how to produce a similar amount of production at our seafood company. And even though the restaurant sales are not taking nearly as much volume as they were pre-COVID or last year, we've had to take that production and reallocate it. And Ben, you want to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah. I mean, I think there's really the silver lining here was looking at how people started behaving in their kitchens once they were locked down. And, they weren't just starting their own sourdough. They were also starting to cook seafood a lot more than they ever have before. We noticed that there was just a new openness to trying new things in your home kitchen. So, taking that conversation and starting it with our partners at Whole Foods. I mean, they were actually eager to help us move more seafood, and they came to us and asked how they could actually buy more lobster and how they could, put inventory we would have sent to our restaurants into their seafood case or into an innovative product like a lobster cake. And so the first step was improving our grocery business and growing it.
Yeah. We're getting some questions in from Facebook, but before I take those questions, I just want to let everyone know watching that Luke is actually on the right side and Ben is on the left side, even though it says Luke Holden under Ben and Ben Conniff under Luke. If you guys want to switch spots, you can. I don't know if our graphics people operating somewhere remotely in America can change that around, but you can switch seats if you want, and then you'll be sitting over your name.
Yeah, happy to do that for you guys.
All right, there you go. There is Ben over Ben's name. There is Luke
tall like
over
that.
Luke's name. There you go. Okay, there you go. Perfect, perfectly framed. So I'm getting questions from, we're getting questions from LinkedIn and Facebook. This is from Jessie Hempel. Hello, Jessie. Great to hear from you. She says, looking at it, from the end of August now, would you have done anything differently back in March?
Honestly, at this point in time, I would say no. We put people and safety first and any of the needs of the business second. But we also lived in that Stockdale paradox, and we were not overly optimistic or blindly optimistic. We were living in reality and making decisions in reality. So I say no regrets, because Lukes Lobster is going to get through this, and we're going to do it as a team. And I couldn't be more grateful for that opportunity.
Now you've got locations in Japan and Taiwan, right? How are those locations doing? I mean, are they opened? Are they sort of operating normally in comparison to the ones in the U.S.?
They're open. So there's 10 Shacks in Japan that are open, and they've made a lot of the similar decisions that we've seen restaurants in the U.S. do. You know, they've got some of their best and brightest making the food and serving guests and changing their labor model and renegotiating rents with the landlords that want to be long-term partners. But the reality is that they are highly dependent on international tourism, and there's none of that. So yeah, they're working on fraction of sales as well.
You know, it's really interested to read about some kind of really creative things you did. Obviously, going to directly to consumers by packaging lobster. You're also going direct to consumer through your website, right? You're offering direct to consumer products that you can order through the website. And I think I read that like some of your Shacks started, you know, like when customers came to pick up meals, they were also selling things like flour and butter and like household pantry staples. Which is super cool. I mean, really creative, right? What are some other things that you've been thinking about, and other kind of strategies and even tactics that you're thinking about as you move forward to kind of, you know, try and diversify your revenue streams and you know keep everything, you know, moving forward?
I think that, you know, what you said about the direct to consumer e-commerce is really, you know, one of the most exciting things that's been happening here and that has happened here, and that it really goes back to, you know, mid-March when we first realized we were going to have to start shutting down Shacks for a period of time that we didn't know how long it was going to be. All we knew is we need to find a way to keep buying seafood and getting seafood to people who want it. So it was actually an amazing experience. We had one of our teammates who was our culinary director named Lauren just suddenly have to start researching how to build an e-commerce business. And, you know, that had only really been a pie in the sky hope for us before then. So she started digging into the nuts and bolts, and then Megan on our marketing team started figuring out how you market and advertise an e-commerce business. And it was almost like watching me and Luke in 2009 all over again, because they're in this kind of pressure cooker, don't have time, don't have experience, just need to figure it out situation. And in 7 days, they had set up this website. It was a pretty heroic experience to be a part of.
We have had other restaurateurs and food companies on the show throughout the COVID period. We talked to Danny Meyer, you know, famously the founder of Shake Shack and Union Square Cafe, and he's sort of a lot of chefs and restaurateurs look to him and you know, for guidance. And there's no question that this has been the biggest challenge for the food and restaurant industry, and easily in half a century. Are you sort of seeing or looking out across your industry and seeing how some other restaurants or food groups are dealing with this creatively? Are there ideas out there that you have seen that seem to be working, that may work for you?
I think, given that we're a vertically integrated seafood company, we have to look at all of our stakeholders, and we've got to solve problems in our own supply chain. So we've spent more time trying to figure out how to bolster and fortify that supply chain. Like, so for us, again, our fishermen they're going to go out and fish, and they need to do that to keep their livelihoods going. And then our production facility, the 150 teammates there, they need those jobs, and they need them on a monthly basis. So for us, leaning into that supply chain and saying, okay, where are customers buying, and then how do we build robust businesses around that? You know, our grocery branded business in 2009, we probably did around 200,000 units between two different SKUs. will be over 1 million units
Right.
this year. And we've got delicious things like
Right.
lobster mac and cheese with breadcrumbs and lobster bisque and a crab claw appetizer and lobster cakes. And then that other side of the business, the e-commerce business, we're going to be like bluefin tuna. We've got boats tied up around here because there's no market for an incredible product like bluefin tuna. So we started to sell that on our e-commerce site, and it's going gangbusters for us. And that enabled us to go say, guys, go fish, go make a paycheck. And like for us, where there's so many crinkles in the seafood supply chain beyond our typical lobster, crab, and shrimp species, that now we get an opportunity to go solve with this e-commerce direct-to-consumer model.
Yeah. And I guess, so to answer your question, it's not just looking to restaurant leaders. It's looking at leaders in direct-to-consumer, e-commerce, grocery. So there's been so many resources that either we've spoken to or researched that we're sort of trying to borrow from all over the spectrum of industries at this point.
So is there a glut of lobsters, of seafood right now? Is there an oversupply?
Lobsters in particular, we've avoided a bit of a mess. And while price is healthy, it's not what it was last year. But on the flip side, like, yes, there's a huge glut here in the state of Maine for things like oysters, which are typically consumed in restaurants, and bluefin tuna, which is almost exclusively served in restaurants. So really, like, as our core brand mission to become the world's most respected seafood brand, I think we feel like we've got a great opportunity to showcase and deliver on some of the value propositions for these other wonderful species.
Give us a sense of, Ben. I think you said something back in May. I think it was in the Wall Street Journal. You said there's no profit, only survival at this point. That there's a whole supply chain. The fishermen who sell their catch to Lukes, et cetera, who count on your company to pull them through. So, can you sort of explain why? I mean, is that because the cruise ships and the casinos and the big restaurants are not ordering seafood, that all of a sudden you're sort of, all these fishermen are going to you guys and saying, hey, like, can you help us out? Is that basically what's happening?
I mean, in some ways, like for the example of this spring, we started selling day-boat scallops. We'd never sold them before, but the guys that catch our lobster at that time of year also go out and catch scallops. And yeah, they didn't have a home for a lot of those scallops. So they said, I know you normally don't buy this because you don't sell scallops in your restaurant, but I need a buyer, or I don't know what I'm going to do with them, and I don't know how I'm going to make my living during this particular season. And that was what made us realize that because we were going into people's home kitchens rather than into our shacks, which aren't built to cook a variety of items, we could now have this seasonal rotation of what fishermen were catching at its absolute best and at a time that they really needed a home for it. And yeah, those conversations really sparked the ingenuity on our side to say, we can, now that we're not limited to the four walls of the Lukes Lobster Shack in Manhattan, we can actually do a whole variety of different things. And rather than being restricted to only reaching folks within a short radius of our shack, we can now get them to the entire country overnight. And it really, like, that constant interaction with fishermen and understanding what their situation was, what they needed from us, was really what sparked our idea to pivot away from only selling lobster to selling this greater variety.
I know that your lobster is certified sustainable, right? But I guess the Marine Stewardship Council is going to revoke Maine lobster, the fisheries in Maine, it's going to revoke their sustainable certification, I guess, because fishermen have to go out further to get to cooler oceans, cooler temperatures, cooler waters as the ocean temperature rises. How will that impact the sustainability of what you guys do?
It could be a bit of a rabbit hole, but I'll sort of just sum it up to say the MSC, the Marine Stewardship Council, part of their policy is that they kind of have to follow what federal laws and courts are wrapped up in, and so there's this kind of awkward court decision it's really not relevant to Maine fishermen, because all the data and evidence shows that any issues with right whales are not happening in Maine waters based on their migratory patterns and where their food is. But this certification kind of gets lost as collateral damage in an issue that's really federal as opposed to Maine related. So it just means that we have to work that much harder to communicate the actual situation with lobster sustainability in Maine specifically, because a lot of these certification bodies, they just aren't specific enough in looking at what fishery you're talking about and what issues are or aren't posed by that fishery. So, it wasn't exactly the problem that we needed right now in the middle of COVID. But ultimately, we know that the sustainability of the catch here isn't actually a problem.
Here's a question from Patrice Esperant via LinkedIn. Patrice asks, how has COVID shifted your approach to expansion? Because you had really ambitious plans to expand and to build more restaurants out. So is that kind of on hold for now?
I wouldn't say it's on hold. It's something that we're starting to get reorganized around, though. For us, the restaurant business was tough pre-COVID. There was a lot of competition for real estate, and this whole like Amazon effect of ultimately a lot of retail kind of going out of business. It created more and more competition for restaurants, and more restaurants were sort of filling these real estates. So the whole concept of like share of stomach was very, very competitive. So we had escalating rents and a lot of competition, and this is it's horrible for the industry, but there's going to be opportunity to grow on the backside of this, because there'll be a lot more opportunity.
Guys, a question for both of you, really. Given all the challenges that you faced over the last 6-7 months, and that you will probably face for the next several months, what are some of the things you've learned about your own leadership that you want to take with you into the business in the future when this hopefully this period passes? What are some of the things you've learned about how you lead that you want to really continue and develop and maintain?
Yeah, as you can hear in the background, you got the bottles clanking around. We're collecting the 5-cent deposits. I think for me, it's been like we've always run like a very flat organization, and it's like there's no task that's ever been too small or too big for this team. But what's been nice about this crisis is that as the team has had to really kind of come together and problem solve on a daily, weekly basis, and make decisions with maybe 80% of the facts, because that's all we're going to have. I've always been extremely appreciative of the team and the people here that choose to be part of this family business. But how we've gotten back to our roots around having big team meetings and making sure that any concept of like hierarchy is sort of dismantled in a way of like transparency has been something that I really hope that we maintain going forward.
I guess I would say that this has really reaffirmed the importance of the core values of the business, and especially, our transparency and purpose, because the other one is taste, and that has been maintained throughout the business and always will be. But transparency, that ability to speak so directly, clearly, and honestly with every person who touches this business inside and out is, I think, the number one thing that's kept us going, and that's allowed us to make the right decisions and the right pivots with the right amount of input from everyone involved. And I think really our investment in the purpose beyond just the business aspects of what we do, the reason that we're here and the benefits that we're trying to create, that's really guided our decision making, and it's guided how we communicate with our guest base, which continues to grow online even as it shrinks in person. I just firmly believe that we're seeing a consumer that is going to make their decisions more and more on what your company is doing to better the world, and I think that we need to be louder and louder about what that is, because we're not looking to go back to normal. We're looking to create a new normal that's better for everyone, and I think that this situation has really just hammered home the need for us to focus on that.
Luke, Holden, Ben Conniff, co-founders of Lukes Lobster. Thanks, guys.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, Guy.
And thank you, everybody, for watching. We're going to be back here on Tuesday to speak with Sandra O'Lynn, founder and CEO of KiwiCo. They offer subscriptions for enrichment projects for kids, so check that out. On Friday, I'll be speaking to professional gamer Pokimane. Pokimane has amassed a huge following, like 5 million followers on Twitch and YouTube, and runs a production company. If you're into gaming or thinking about how to turn that business into a venture, you're going to want to check that out. Also, the How I Built This book is now available for pre-order. Sorry, it's very shiny. I've got my copy here. September 15th it comes out, but you can pre-order it now. It's available anywhere you get books: Amazon, Target, independent bookshops, Barnes & Noble, etc. So please check that out. Thank you, everybody, for watching. I will see you back here next week. We've got a new episode of How I Built This coming out on Monday. Luke, Ben, thanks again, and I hoop to see you guys soon. Hope to have a lobster roll with you soon.
Yeah, it's going to happen one of these days. We'll get there.
Yeah. All right. Bye, everybody.